The most bullish billionaire in Bitcoin does it again, where he is now telling the public and the traditional financial markets that he plans on taking over the fixed income and the bond market, two 300 trillion plus markets. And he's saying the quiet parts out loud that Bitcoin is taking over at a rapid pace. But let's not listen to me. Let's listen to Michael Saylor himself, hear what he had to say.
Michael, it's great to have you with us. We have a lot to talk about, and one of those things is a recent call from Jim Chanos. Of course, he's a legendary short seller. He came out recently and said, basically, buy Bitcoin, short strategy shares. And just to set the scene here, I'm curious what you make of that.
I don't think he understands what our business model is. We're actually the largest issuer of Bitcoin-backed credit instruments in the world. So last week, we just raised $1 billion by selling a preferred stock, non-cumulative, called Stride. That means we basically borrowed money that we never have to pay back, that we pay a dividend on, but we could suspend the dividend if we needed to. So Jim has been thinking that we somehow needed to sell the equity. We now are in a situation where we have Strike, Stride, and Strife, three publicly floating preferred stocks that are not dilutive to the equity. They all meet.
So he's basically lining out that MicroStrategy, MSTR, is using three different avenues in order to purchase more Bitcoin. Yet we are seeing this massive amounts of shorts, the short volume hitting an all-time high, and people essentially coming at MicroStrategy's neck. So I had to get Jason of Meanwhile, who's got a traditional financial background here, to dive into these traditional financial avenues that MicroStrategy is using. So Jason, what do you think about the revolution that MSTR is doing with all of these Strife, Stride, and all of these other equities that they are offering in order to purchase more Bitcoin?
Yeah, no, it's great to be on here. It's definitely interesting times. I've been following MicroStrategy since 2020 when they first started allocating to Bitcoin. Started small, and here we are today where they've renamed the company and they have over 244,000 Bitcoin on balance sheet. It seems like there's a lot of people out there that don't fully understand what MicroStrategy is doing. People think there's margin calls somewhere, that the next bear market, the crypto winter, MicroStrategy could be forced to sell if there's enough sellers of MSTR stock like Chanos who are trying to buy Bitcoin and short MSTR, that they could force liquidations and create this cascading effect, this domino effect. But it seems like MicroStrategy's, or I guess I should say strategies, long position in Bitcoin through these equity converts has stood the test of time in the sense that they survived the 2022 and 2023 bear market. There was rumors back then after FTX collapsed that there was a margin call level around $12,000 per Bitcoin. If it got there for MicroStrategy to be forced sellers, we never got there. I think the low right after Sam Bankman-Fried blew FTX up, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back in 2022 of all the frauds and liquidations, was I think it was 15,500 or so in Bitcoin was the low of that cycle, November, December of 2022. So we never got to that magical 12K level to see if MicroStrategy would get any type of forced liquidation. And here we are in a much bigger scale where Strategy has accumulated a massive amount of Bitcoin on their balance sheet through all these different, financial engineering tactics of equity converts and various, ways to raise capital to buy Bitcoin. And so I'm not sure that there is forced liquidation. I'm not sure that that's how it works. And I feel like people that are calling for it don't quite understand the exact business model, that very few people do understand the exact business model. And only time will tell, but he's clearly convinced other, he created the playbook, famously so, for endowments, charities, corporations, governments, you name it, on how to allocate to Bitcoin in their corporate treasury reserve, either bullish, mega bullish or laser eye bullish ways of getting into, different ways of essentially creating leverage to buy Bitcoin. So uh, people are buying into it. I think that being on the Bitcoin standard is important. My company, meanwhile, is on the Bitcoin standard, and we can get into that a little bit later. But I love the idea of what's going on in the world right now with, led by MicroStrategy.
Yeah, 100%. But it's interesting to see the amount of shorts just rapidly increase. It's like these guys aren't getting burned enough with everything that is going on. And you mentioned a few different things, one of them being the crypto winter as well, that we've kind of seen in the past. Michael Saylor actually addressed that very thing in this interview as well. So you might have heard it, but let's hear what he had to say on the potential of the downfalls of the volatility that Bitcoin can still face.
I think when Bitcoin rallies, if it surges to 500,000 or $1 million, then maybe we could talk about it crashing down by $200,000 a coin. But at the current price levels, it only takes $50 million to turn the entire drive shaft of the crypto economy one turn. And you've got the Trump.
So he basically was saying here, I don't know if it was hard for people to hear, but he was essentially saying that, when we get to this point where we're at with the amount of massive money flying in and, the playbook that MSTR has lined out for so long, I love to show this here, the MSTR flywheel is what I like to call it. And, essentially issuing debt to buy more Bitcoin. This is all what they were doing simply before they had the products like the Strive, the Stride, the Strife. And I think the interesting aspect of all of this is just how quickly they're rolling out all of these different products and continue to roll them out. We had the STRK launch in January, STRF launched in March, and then Stride launched here in June. So it seems like MSTR is just finding new ways to increase what we're seeing here, right? They're looking at the amount of Bitcoin they've got per share based on, this MNAV that they're giving everybody. So I think that the amount of Bitcoin that they're seeing here is skyrocket. And I think that it's extremely interesting to see just how many other corporations are really starting to get on board. But I think the interesting aspect of a lot of what we're seeing is the fixed income market and the bond market essentially being flipped on its head. I mean, the fixed income market is something that we really haven't seen a ton of disruption for. It's a $147 trillion market in 2023. And then on top of that, we have Wells Fargo saying the quiet parts out loud, literally telling us that we're seeing that Bitcoin taking over and tapping into that $300 trillion global bond market might be the most underappreciated Bitcoin story of 2025. So, Jason, with this traditional financial experience, right? Everybody always talks about the 60-40, having bonds in the portfolio. Do you think the bond market is essentially going to get killed off here as we're seeing more of these, Bitcoin corporations type of offerings come through?
Well, I'd say the traditional fixed income market's not really going anywhere. Rates are pretty elevated, and you can get some pretty juicy yields in U.S. Treasuries and municipal debt and other types of debt. So while fixed income's not going anywhere, in my opinion, the 60-40 model is completely dead. I think it died pretty much early in COVID. With MMT, modern monetary theory, and just the general governmental response economically to the pandemic of printing lots of money, giving out stimulus. That was a boon for risk assets. Equities ripped. Bitcoin obviously ripped in 2020 and 2021, parts of 2022. And so I think that while the bond market is here to stay, that leverage, this financial engineering of equity converts, issuing debt to convert into equity so that MicroStrategy can raise money to buy Bitcoin and only Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin for the long term, and other companies following suit, it's just financial engineering. It's using these tools that are fixed income, historically fixed income tools, for a new modern type of conversion investment, derivative, you can call it, in a way to acquire Bitcoin. So it's definitely something to keep your eye on. I don't know how many companies, Brandon, are following MicroStrategy's playbook right now in issuing debt, in issuing converts to buy Bitcoin, but it's got to be in the single digits, right?
Yeah, 100%. So right now, according to Bitcoin treasuries, we've got 126 publicly traded companies. Now, around this time last year, this was like, I believe, under 40. So we've already seen like a 3 to 4x in that. And that's just publicly traded companies, right? They make these announcements every, quarter or so. So it really takes a lot of time for these to catch up. Then we've also got 35 private companies that are doing that, but they're all not really following, I would say, the direct MicroStrategy playbook right now. I think a lot of them are doing this right here, what MicroStrategy started off with, where they're looking at it to just issue more debt to buy Bitcoin, and they aren't necessarily doing maybe the derivatives. Well, I guess not derivatives is maybe not the right word, but utilizing the products like STRK, STRF, and STRD are doing. I just don't think a lot of the financial engineering, so to speak, has really taken place and taken it everywhere. I think, what you see from GameStop, what you see from a lot of these different corporations right now is you see these guys essentially just looking at it and then just simply just wanting to buy Bitcoin. They're not necessarily getting to that point where they're expanding on that and maybe going all in like Michael Saylor is. I think they're just all starting to dip their toe in the water. And that's essentially what we're seeing.
And you know what the goal is, right? There's one singular goal for all these companies, and it's to increase their stock price. And as long as Bitcoin goes up in value, which the bulls like us, like Saylor, like the other types of companies that are following Saylor's playbook, what they're doing in accumulating Bitcoin is just accumulating an asset that they think is going to go up in price, will increase the value of their company and therefore the value of their stock price. And that is good for equity shareholders. That is good for anyone who owns the stock, who owns part of that company. And the better performance you have, the more people flock into your equities, and it's this self-perpetuating cycle. So as long as Bitcoin rips, and by the way, I think we're in this coiled moment in time right now where Bitcoin is on the verge of exploding even higher than it already has. I mean, we're damn near all-time highs right now, and I think we're going to just catapult much higher very soon, and it could be quick. And so this strategy is prescient. The timing is really good for companies getting into it, and if you buy an asset that starts really increasing in value and your company's assets are going up, then your stock price is going to go up. And that is the core of Saylor's playbook. That is exactly what he's trying to promote to the world. Do you want your stock price to go up? This is how you do it. This is how I did it. I had this software company that's now a Bitcoin holding company, and look at my valuations. And while there are a lot of skeptics and bears out there that don't believe in Bitcoin, that don't understand that just because it has no intrinsic value doesn't mean that it's worthless, that it has utility value and other types of value that are extremely important and absolute. It is, I think it's a really important strategy for everyone to at least consider, to get smart on and decide whether, if you're a CFO of a publicly traded company or you run a charity or an endowment, if this is right for you or not. You should at least know both sides of the argument to make your own objective decisions. And I think that when people really dive into the Bitcoin treasury playbook and the script and how it can work and or not for your company, that most people, when they really understand it, will realize that this is absolutely worth an allocation. The question is how much.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree with that as well. And, you're mentioning some of the bears, right? One of the most famous bears that we have is Jamie Dimon. And the interesting aspect of what JP Morgan is doing, and I think a lot of people, who have come to these live streams before know I'm loving this chart here lately because of the amount of MSTR stock that JP Morgan Chase is rapidly going into. Now, I think the unique thing And the tie-in with Wells Fargo here is that Jamie Dimon like literally said some of the quiet parts out loud here recently, where he's saying that the bond market is going to crack and that something terrible is going to happen to the bond market specifically. So I think that these Bitcoin bears, although they are shouting from the rooftops and saying things like, hey, Bitcoin is going to crash and burn and all of these different things, they're all seeing what the Kraken CFO has predicted, that more than 10,000 publicly traded companies could own Bitcoin in the next few years. So this is all to say that, this rapid increase is just getting started. I mean, we're seeing Trump media submit for $12 billion to buy Bitcoin companies that have Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And this is all with Bitcoin just kind of floating around that 108,000 that you were kind of referencing there. So we're not necessarily even into the full on bull territory. And we're going to get into more of that. Maybe we'll even get a price prediction out of Jason here in a second. But for all 150 to 200 of you here coming in on the live stream, get your Lightning wallets ready, because my friends over at the Bitcoin Well are giving you guys some free sats. And all you had to do was just show up here at the Green Candle live stream. So make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button with the bell notifications and smoking that like Cheech and Chong. But the long story of it is that if you buy Bitcoin and you sign up using promo code Green Candle, you will get 2 free plays to get Bitcoin every time you show up. So let's give you some free Bitcoin here as we've got it going. What do we got? We got 481 sats for all of you guys. So all of you guys joining on Twitter and on YouTube, make sure you're smoking the like, doing all that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, if you're missing it, if you missed that, you can get you could go to bitcoinwell.com/greencandle, sign up today. And then you guys all know I always am preaching self-custody. So make sure you're going to bitbox.swiss. You can buy yourself a hardware wallet. And I prefer the Bitcoin only edition. Then they've also got a steel wallet so you can protect your precious Bitcoin. And you got to do it quickly, folks, because we're seeing all of these Bitcoin corporations pop up left and right. As I mentioned, Trump's Bitcoin or Trump's media company is filing for $12 billion to raise up to buy Bitcoin. And there's a few that you probably haven't even ever heard of talking about buying Bitcoin. We've even got a coffee company raising billions of dollars to buy Bitcoin. We've got all of this craziness going on in the world. So, this revolution has started and it's going to continue to keep on pumping. But Jason, I'm curious to hear what you think of all of these different corporations just kind of popping up out of nowhere. I mean, if you see this, we got Logitech, 1.5 billion. We've got Vanity Coffee, 1.1 billion. K-Wave Media, 500 million. And the amount of Bitcoin off exchanges is just getting scooped up at a rapid pace. So what do you think of all this? Do you think we'll potentially see a short squeeze with the amount of Bitcoin we're seeing taken off here and all of these corporations buying Bitcoin?
I think this is just all playing into the thesis that Bitcoin's early, even at $108,000, $109,000, that we're in early days. Now, I've been in this space since 2013 when I first purchased Bitcoin. And if you asked me in 2025 where we'd be, I would have thought we would have had a lot more adoption, not to mention price, but just in terms of adoption percentage of humans on Earth relative to the entire population that own Bitcoin. And so it just feels like the education is still percolating, that people are still learning, that people are skeptical because they can't touch it or feel it or don't think it has intrinsic value, like Chanos and Peter Schiff like to say. And there's still, and Jamie Dimon and Nouriel Roubini and all these haters that just, for whatever reason, are either talking their book or are gold bugs and not Bitcoin bugs and don't want to see Bitcoin eat gold's lunch, or think that Bitcoin is challenging the status quo in terms of governments or economies or banks. and just, are really speaking their book, and don't want to admit that, there's something here, and aren't allowing their clients of the bank, for example, to buy Bitcoin or to wire money onto Bitcoin exchanges, crypto exchanges, things like that. And so it's early days. I think that all these companies that you've never heard of. Sorry for these coffee companies or whatever. I've never heard of them, but I'm glad to see that they finally come around in June of 2025 to figure out that maybe we should own some Bitcoin. Maybe we should issue some debt to raise money to buy some Bitcoin. Maybe this Bitcoin thing isn't going away. It's not a fad. It's not going to zero. And it's only been going up. MicroStrategy did it. They proved that there is game theory and math behind why a corporation, a publicly traded corporation with stock, should be allocating some of their corporate reserves to Bitcoin in addition to other asset classes. So it just feels like people are starting to finally come around to the fact that everyone should own some Bitcoin. Question is how much. The question is how. Question is where. For how long. Do you have price targets? These are other more trader investment type of discussions that we could get into, but it's early, man.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I love this chart that Luke shows. And I know for those of you who come to the channel know that him and I both love this one just because of how much Bitcoin we're getting taken off exchanges. And then we have about like a 450 Bitcoin that are available just by forced sellers from the miners on a daily basis. But I mean, if you look at the amount of Bitcoin that these guys are buying, if you just put it at 100,000 for even numbers, we're looking at 15,000 Bitcoin. We're looking at 10,000 or 11,000 Bitcoin. We're looking at, 5,000 Bitcoin here. And with 3,000 coins mined essentially every week, they're buying 10 weeks of supply. And that's just these three different companies that you've never heard of before. And so I think that these guys, they're scooping it up at an all-time rate. And I think, eventually we're going to start to see Bitcoin skyrocket in flight and really take off here and start to see these price runs up that we've essentially never seen before. And I think it's all kind of making for a perfect cocktail here as we're seeing the shorts volume for MSTR also just, absolutely take off. I mean, we've got all-time high in shorts all over the place. We've got haters everywhere. And the reality is that eventually they're all going to have to bend the knee. Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan Chase have already slowly started to do that by offering some of these products. And I think, more of these corporations, they're going to realize exactly what you guys over at Meanwhile are realizing and what every other industry is seemingly is starting to realize. And that's, you got to bend the knee to Bitcoin and you really got to get there. So Jason, I mean, I love what you guys are doing over at Meanwhile and flipping up the life insurance industry on its head. So why don't you go into a little bit about what you guys are doing and, how the life insurance industry can't even be changed by Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. As I said earlier, I've been in crypto since 2013. I discovered Meanwhile last year, and I quickly got a policy for myself. It's whole life insurance, fully denominated in Bitcoin. The light bulb went off for me, and I realized, oh my God, this is such a no-brainer. Taking a 300-year-old instrument that is life insurance, literally been around for over 300 years, and marrying it to a long-term HODL asset that's Bitcoin, and they go together like peanut butter and jelly. It's really great. So Meanwhile is a Bermuda-based Bitcoin denominated life insurance carrier. We're backed by companies like Northwestern Mutual, Sam Altman, Google. We just raised a Series A couple months ago from Framework Ventures, Folger Ventures, and Wences Cesares from Zappo Bank. And so we've raised a little over $60 million to date. As I said, we're in Bermuda. We are just like lots of life insurance and reinsurance companies being domiciled in Bermuda. It's a good thing. They're one of the most credible insurance regulators on the planet. They are strict, they are onerous, they require tight and large capital reserve ratios, basically assets versus liabilities that were always covered with a big cushion. And so the point is that we're a regulated, licensed, Bitcoin-denominated life insurance carrier. And so we have this whole life insurance product where you pay your premiums in Bitcoin, your death benefits in Bitcoin, and most interestingly, you can get policy loans in Bitcoin, but at a new stepped-up cost basis. So let me explain a little bit what that means. Traditional life insurance, you go to a Mass Mutual or someone and you say, I'd like $1 million in coverage for my life in a whole life policy. And they'll say, great, Jason, let's crunch some numbers based on your age and health and sex and whether you're a smoker or not. And you want $1 million in coverage? Great. Crunch numbers. Here's how much in premium that you're going to have to pay in dollars and fiat, either each month or each year. And in that premium is baked in fees and expenses. And the dollars that you're paying in premium go into a mutual fund or some sort of index fund with a guaranteed growth rate of about 4%. And so you're putting dollars in premium and it goes into this investment account that grows at 4% a year. And over time, it might be up 30% in 2 decades. And what's interesting about whole life and unique about whole life is that you have this investment account that you can tap into, that you can borrow out of tax-free. Everything in life insurance grows tax-free. So if I want to buy a house one day and I need some cash for a down payment and my life insurance policy is grown and I can go to my life insurance carrier and say, you know what, I'd like a loan, please. And it's up 30%, let's say. And they'll say, great, you can borrow up to 90% of the surrender value of the loan. That's up 30 of the policy. That's up 30%. And by the way, you don't have to pay cap gains on that 30% depreciation, which is pretty great. So I say, cool, give me $100,000 of my $1 million policy. You never have to repay the loan, and you're not at risk of a margin call if the price of the portfolio crashes. It gets netted out of your death benefit. So instead of $1 million death benefit, my death benefit is now 900,000 because I'm borrowing 100 grand. Now let's think in Bitcoin. You pay your premiums in Bitcoin, your death benefits in Bitcoin, and these policy loans are in Bitcoin, no dollars. We operate as a holdco operating company structure. The operating company where the premiums go in does not have a bank account, doesn't need one. We are on the Bitcoin standard. And so when you pay your premiums in Bitcoin, and you can get policy loans, just like I mentioned before, we're not investing in mutual funds or index funds. You're in Bitcoin, and we're going to grow the pot of Bitcoin by a guaranteed 2% a year in Bitcoin terms. And if the price of Bitcoin happens to go up in that time, then your growth is amplified by perhaps order of magnitude. Depends on the price action of Bitcoin. But we don't think in dollars. We think in Bitcoin. So let's use an example. You bought Bitcoin at $1,000 a coin many years ago. You're an early adopter. Congratulations, you have Bitcoin and you've been holding it in self-custody, as one should. And you've been sitting on it. It's not doing anything. It's not earning yield, but it's in your custody. And you've obviously watched the price of Bitcoin go up. Let's say one day that Bitcoin goes to $1 million a coin. What you can do is either sell it and pay $999,000 of capital gains appreciation, which is a huge tax bill that you're going to have to write to the government. Or if you have a policy with Meanwhile, what you can do is you can originate a loan from your policy, say, hey, Meanwhile, I have my policy. I'd like to borrow Bitcoin. You come up with a number of Bitcoin that you want to borrow. It's up to 90% of the surrender value of your policy. And let's say that you want to borrow 2 Bitcoin, that you can borrow 2 Bitcoin. So you go to Meanwhile and say, I'd like to borrow 2 Bitcoin, please. And they say, sure. Where do you want it? You give them a wallet address. Meanwhile, will KYC that wallet address for AML purposes, and they will send you 2 Bitcoin. Then you're going to go to Coinbase or any exchange, doesn't matter, OTC desk exchange. Let's just use Coinbase as an example. You go to Coinbase and you say, I have 2 Bitcoin, I'm going to sell, please. And they say, great, but hold on, Jason. Where did this Bitcoin come from? And what's the cost basis for tax purposes? Well, you'll have a documentation from Meanwhile saying that this Bitcoin came from your regulated life insurance policy. And the cost basis, it says right here, is established on the day that you originated the loan. So in this case, it says your cost basis is $1 million per coin. So they'll say, great, you sell limit order $1 million, you get $2 million in cash wired to your bank account. No, because your cost basis and your sell price are equal. Your original $1,000 cost basis is completely moot because it's now in this tax vehicle that is life insurance, and you don't have to pay back this $2 million. The beauty of life insurance and policy loans is that you never have to repay them. Let's say your death benefit was 20 Bitcoin and you borrowed 2. Well, your new death benefit is 18 Bitcoin, and you'll never have to repay the 2 Bitcoin. You also are not at risk of a margin call. If Bitcoin has this 4-year cycle, Saylor just said that he thinks the 4-year cycle is dead. He may be right, but let's say that there is another bear market a couple of years down the road, and the price of Bitcoin crashes 80% as it has in the past. So Bitcoin goes from 1 million to 200,000. Well, you're not at risk of a margin call, of liquidation, of topping up, because what you've done in a policy loan is you're not borrowing from a lending desk, you're not borrowing from a trading desk, you're not borrowing from a life insurance company. You're really just borrowing from yourself Bitcoin against Bitcoin collateral, because remember, we think in Bitcoin, meanwhile. You're not borrowing dollars against your Bitcoin, you're borrowing Bitcoin against your own death benefit. So really, you're borrowing Bitcoin from your beneficiaries. If it's your spouse, she thought she was going to get 20 Bitcoin when you died. Well, she's only getting 18. Sorry, honey. But that's how life insurance and policy loans work. So you're never at risk of margin call. You never have to repay the loan. It's completely tax-free. And you still are long Bitcoin because you still have 18 Bitcoin. And so in this example, let's just say that you're paying 10 Bitcoin in premium for 20 in death benefit. That's about what a 30-year-old healthy non-smoking male would get in terms of ratio. 10 Bitcoin in premium, 20 Bitcoin in death benefit. So you're paying 10 Bitcoin in to get 20 in death benefit. That's an extra 10 Bitcoin that you get, your loved ones get over the course of your life. That's 100% return, doubling your Bitcoin. How else can you get yield like that? 2% a year is what we create and we guarantee to every policyholder in Bitcoin terms. That's a little bit of an overview of what Bitcoin denominated life insurance means. That meanwhile, we're on the Bitcoin standard. We have a Bitcoin treasury. We invest it. Everything is Bitcoin for us. We do not think in dollars.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like it's almost like a personal way to do the Saylor infinite money glitch, right? Where you're essentially utilizing the traditional financial tools we have today in order to scoop up more Bitcoin and continue to do that. So what do you think the response has been so far from other Bitcoiners, because this is not exactly a traditional type of I guess offering, right? Because life insurance, a lot of people just have it through their employer, whatever. Maybe they brush it off. Like, how has the response been from Bitcoiners? Do they see, essentially the value proposition and the, the almost like infinite Bitcoin glitch that you guys have unlocked here?
Yeah, it's funny. Life insurance has this old school antiquated stigma associated with it, where people think of life insurance salesmen as, kind of like greasy, sleazy, knock on doors, try to sell you something that you're not sure you need or want. Um, while that may be the case, it is an unbelievable financial tool with all these tax benefits. The US government created all these tax benefits and put them into life insurance because they're trying to incentivize people to have life insurance, because you protect yourself, you protect your family, less dependency on the state, on the government for handouts. And so as a result, everything inside life insurance grows tax-free, and you can get tax-free policy loans. And when you die and your Bitcoin gets transferred in a white glove way to your family, that's tax-free, as opposed to self-custody Bitcoin. If you die tomorrow, tragically, do your loved ones know how to access your ledger, your Trezor, your wallet, safety deposit boxes, private keys, passwords, Google Authenticator, YubiKeys, you name it, all these different multi-factor authentication tools and pain points that we've gone through to protect our self-custody assets. Can someone that's not as tech savvy and in crypto like us really figure it out if suddenly we were to disappear tragically tomorrow? It's self-custody is great, and the invention of Bitcoin is foundationally about the ability to own your own assets without relying on a bank or someone else to own it in your name. But with that comes great responsibility of making sure that if you have loved ones and you want to be able to pass your Bitcoin on to your family, that you can do so. And even if they can figure out self-custody, technically it goes into what's called probate. and there's a lot of taxes that go to the government as a result of that transfer. And so life insurance is tax-free upon the transfer. So there's no capital gains or income tax associated with that transfer. So when people really understand that they have this Bitcoin for the long term, and that it's complicated, and that not everyone understands how Bitcoin wallets and custody work, and you might, but your family might not, and you want it to go to them in a very seamless way, and you have all these tax benefits, and you can sell your Bitcoin without paying taxes through policy loans, and you get yield on your Bitcoin. I mean, people's heads explode. They're like, this sounds too good to be true. It's amazing. I can't believe I never knew this existed. But I'll tell you what, from the community of Bitcoiners that are in the high net worth and family office demographic, they love life insurance. Very wealthy people have historically used life insurance to their benefit time and time again because of these tax advantages and trying to preserve wealth. So this really is a way to preserve wealth and grow wealth over time, using life insurance as almost like a wrapper for your Bitcoin.
Yeah, 100%. And I think everybody should be, keeping a close eye on like what these corporations are doing, what these billionaires are doing. I mean, you could trust a third party to hold your Bitcoin. Obviously, I think that, the true way and the true benefit of all of Bitcoin is that essentially you can be your own bank. But I mean, like, look at this from the corporations, right? Like all these wealthy people, they're finding ways to get and obtain more Bitcoin. And it's very rare that you see when these corporations start buying Bitcoin that you see, a sell off. Of course, maybe there's some of the paper hands, maybe there's some of the miners, there's some different factors that could result in selling off some of this Bitcoin. But for the most part, all of these charts are up and to the right. I mean, and I think that that's what we're going to continue to see is wealthy people realizing, hey, I need to find ways to obtain more Bitcoin. And then, you got Michael Saylor on all these Bloomberg channels, all these different things getting touted around as the Bitcoin expert. I mean, I think he was just on Jordan Peterson as well. Like, all these mainstream media outlets are now starting to have to focus onto Bitcoin. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's just all of these touch points and the fact that you guys are now disrupting a different industry that really has just been kind of like you said, right? I mean, it's been an older industry that is ripe for disruption. So I think, Bitcoin on top of Bitcoin, attacking the bond market, kind of dipping its toe into that fixed income market. I think it's just a matter of time before we start to see Bitcoin essentially in everyday conversations with everything. And you mentioned the adoption curve. I think the adoption curves that we're seeing is going to rapidly increase as well. I mean, here's one from Blockware Solutions, where you're seeing this technology adoption curve just really start to, take off here. So the only thing that we've seen take longer or take a shorter amount of time to adopt here has been the internet. So, I mean, I think, being in the same breath as that, I think it's just a matter of time. But Jason, you've been very generous with your time. So why don't you tell people where they can learn more about Meanwhile and, catch up with you guys too, because I know we're both gonna be at the Sound Money Soiree and Bitcoin Day here this weekend in Tampa, Florida. So if you guys haven't gone or gotten your tickets, come and join us. We've got the tickets, the links in the bio for or the show notes for some of the discounts. And Jason, why don't you tell people where they can find out more about me?
Yeah, no, for sure. So you can visit our website at meanwhile.bm. BM is for Bermuda. And you can feel free to email me, jason@meanwhile.bm. I am speaking. I have a 15-minute keynote on Saturday at the conference. I will be there Friday night for the soiree. I'll be there Saturday night for the soiree. Generally, when I tell people about Bitcoin denominated life insurance and I go through all the facets of what it means and how it works, and everyone realizes, oh my God, I should put some of my Bitcoin into a life insurance policy because I plan on holding it for decades anyways. They come up and they have a lot of questions and some clarifications and some, just needing to understand more and make sure that they fully can explain it to their, family and significant others and their tax accountant and their people, because this is an important step in taking out a life insurance policy. Now, while I don't view it as life insurance as much as I view it as a really smart way to hold your Bitcoin for the long term that has all these tax advantages, it is life insurance. So happy to answer any questions if you reach out to me again, Jason@meanwhile.pm, and happy to set up a call and chat with anyone.
There we go. So make sure you guys are smoking that like Cheech and Chong, hitting the subscribe button, and I will put all that in the show notes. So Jason, thanks so much, man.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having me, Brandon.